Wolf, I just got off the phone with a soldier who was just back from Iraq, back in Fort Hood after three days after a one-year rotation in Iraq. Also spent time in Afghanistan, and I asked him to compare. By the way, he's just about a mile and a half away from the shooting that we're talking about at the Soldier Readiness Facility, so he's not in that immediate area. Thank goodness for him. But he did talk about how he has definitely noticed. We've talked to Barbara Starr talking about these increased instances of suicide at Fort Hood, and he said, you know, absolutely he has noticed the difference between before his deployment and now, increased steps to mitigate PTSD among soldiers. And as I mentioned, he is just back from Iraq, went through the re-entries likely at that same facility. And he told me, though, when it comes to sitting down with a counselor, that he said, you know what, this place is really huge and a lot of people tend to fall through the cracks. He said the counseling he received was not incredibly aggressive. Those were his words. One other point, we keep talking about soldier-on-soldier violence, and he told me because the military has changed some of the requirements for entry into U.S. military, he says that there are more and more people, specifically at Fort Hood, who have backgrounds, run-ins with the law, and he told me there is known gang activity.
Tom, it all occurred here at the Readiness Center, where thousands of troops are deployed off to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they go through some final paperwork, some final medical treatment, dental work before they head off to war, because if they're going to be in theater, as they say, for a year or 13 or 14 months, they should get their teeth cleaned before they leave and wait to head over to Afghanistan.
Sure. We're trying to get a little scale on this, Wolf, because as you mentioned, there's a lot we don't know. We want to look at what we can know and do know. We've mentioned earlier, this is more or less in the middle of everything here. The headquarters of the 1st Cavalry over here, base theater over here, softball fields, all of that. When we move into the Readiness Center, just to give you a sense of scale at home, because we've been wondering about this whole time. Look at the area around here. We've got the buildings themselves. We did a little measuring on it. This looks, based upon what we can tell here, more than a one-story building. But even if it's a one-story building, a single floor of this has about 117,000 square feet. So that gives you an idea of how much room these people were dealing with. When this shooting broke out, military, police, people who had to deal with this, they weren't walking into a small area. Big area with a lot of people in it, moving in many different ways, and that can be very chaotic. Beyond that, look out here at the capacity of this place. We calculated more than 1,000 cars could fit out here. You're on a base that has about 40,000 troops associated with it, tremendous number of people, and don't forget, because this adds in every way to the complexity of a situation like this, about 17,000 family members live on post here. So all of those numbers add up to a lot of pressure on what happened in this room and a lot of the confusion about it. That's one of the reasons we don't know so much right now, because when this sort of thing happens, in my experience, it ripples out into the whole community. And as we mentioned earlier, they had a big massacre 18 years ago out in the town here, 20 people killed in that. So you've got to know that there were vestiges of that causing those ripples to be a little bit deeper than they might be in other communities when something like this cuts loose, Wolf. But all these numbers give you a sense of the scale that we're looking at when we look at this place where it all seems to be focused right now. And I'm very interested to hear what we find out about those other 2 people who were stopped, whether or not they were really suspects or simply people who were running away, because I've seen that happen too. Somebody sees someone running away and say he's involved. Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to find out.
We're told, by the way, these soldiers who were being processed at this Readiness Center in Fort Hood were actually being processed to head off to war in Iraq rather than Afghanistan. We still have more than 100,000 troops in Iraq, even though the U.S. is withdrawing.
Sure.
Forces, all combat forces supposedly are going to be out by the end of next August, all troops out by the end of 2000. Presumably, since the 1st Cav has been so much involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, that would make some sense. All right, let's listen to the governor, Rick Perry of Texas. He's speaking.
Colonel Steve McCraw, the head of the Department of Public Safety. I asked him earlier in the day to deploy the resources that we had available, both the Texas Rangers, our Department of Public Safety troopers, and the aviation assets to help with the perimeter of the area. And they are continuing to keep me abreast of the situation. Students in the schools surrounding Fort Hood are now either gone home for the day or they're safely situated. So there appears to be no threat to off of the base at this particular time, but there will be some of the students that will be staying at the schools until the military gives the all clear. Today's events are just a reminder for all of us about the important relationship that we have with our military in this state. Texas has always been generally in those communities where those military bases are specifically great support mechanisms for the men and women of our military. To honor those whose lives have been lost today, I've ordered the flags in our state to be flown at half staff until Sunday. And again, I ask that all of you keep these families and these individuals in your prayers today. With that, without having any other details, I'd like to open it up to those of you in the working media for any questions that you may have.
What are the latest numbers you're hearing, Governor?
The latest numbers that we have are that were 3 shooters. One was killed, 2 in custody. There's upwards of 20 injured, and I think the last number I had, 9 were killed.
What can you tell us about the shooters?
I don't have any information directly about the shooters. I think it's a bit premature to be reporting anything that hadn't been confirmed from an appropriate source. So,
Governor, will you be flying down there?
I don't know. This is one of those instances where we have the right people on the scene. The incident manager for the Department of Public Safety is there. Whether it be an event like a natural disaster of a hurricane, certainly at some point in time I may be on site, but not until I am not a distraction to any of the events that are going on there. So the right people are on scene at this particular point in time. I talked to the individuals on base who was uprange from the event and offered our assistance. So there's good communication between the federal authorities, the FBI's on scene now, it's my understanding, and between the military and the FBI and the federal authorities, of course, that being a federal reservation, that is the appropriate individuals. We are there in a support role, and we got great working relationships with those individuals, and so they know that we are ready and able to assist in any way that we can.
Governor Perry, what about the other installations that are in Texas? Have you heard about any increased security?
I'm sure that those installation commanders have taken the appropriate steps to secure those facilities, and what that may be is to each commander, and they have in place the type of activities and security precautions that are appropriate.
Did Homeland Security, the state Homeland Security Department, go into any sort of alert or code something when this happened?
It's not to my understanding that they have, but then again, that's no direct information to me to that.
Where were you when you heard, Governor?
We were traveling up here from another event in Dallas. So.
And this was right by the Readiness Center around that.
That is my understanding, that it was where they were processing troops. But again, I don't want to be too specific because my details are a bit hazy as well from the standpoint of any specifics about where and when, and so I would rather us stick with what we do know, and that is that it's my understanding that the situation is underhand. And now they're going through the process of identifying the victims and then, of course, identifying their families.
Can you talk a little about security on the base?
From what standpoint?
Some people have said over the years it's been a little lax.
Well, I'll leave that to the military authorities. That is, you know, that's a federal response, and I think it would be inappropriate for me to be making a statement about security on a federal reservation when that's not our duty, and frankly, I would be out of line to do such.
Who in the federal government have you been talking to get about this? Anybody in particular in court
We have talked to the what I call the uprange commander. That's a Colonel Jeffrey Sauer, and the downrange commander is, of course, General Bolger, and he was again downrange and where he needed to be. Thank you all for coming today. God bless you, and keep these people in your prayers today. So long.
There he is, the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, briefing reporters what he knows.